Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a special joint webinar hosted by the Israel Democracy Institute and the Jerusalem Press Club. My name is Talia Deckel, Vice President of the club. I'd like to open with my deepest gratitude to Danai Marks of IDI and Ellie Kletzstein of JPC for working tirelessly to facilitate this event during a very busy time for all of us. We are a day and a half away from what will be Israel's 5th election in 3.5 years, with repercussions on governance, domestic and foreign policymaking, the economy, and long-term public support of our institutions. How did we arrive here? Is there any hope in breaking the stalemate this time? Or does the solution lie in a total transformation of our political system? Answering these questions in the context of their new book, The Parties in Israel, 1992 to 2021, we have with us today two key experts, Professors Gidi Rahat and Ofer Kenig, Senior Fellows at the Israel Democracy Institute here in Jerusalem. Professor Gidi Rahat specializes in political reforms and is a lecturer of political science at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and an international fellow at the Center for the Study of Democracy at UC Irvine. Professor Ofer Kenig is a senior lecturer at the Ashkelon Academic College. His areas of research include comparative politics, political parties, leadership, candidate selection, and Israeli politics. So just before we attempt to provide a way out of this mess, let's look a little bit at the scenarios ahead of us in the short term. The final polls show the right bloc leaning towards a majority of the 61% of the votes, depending on which polls. And if this is indeed the result, Netanyahu is likely able to form a coalition, dispelling fears of an additional stalemate. Professor Rahat, let's begin with you. If this is the case, we're still talking about a narrow coalition and therefore an unstable government. So how do you see the next year playing out?
Well, the elections look exactly the same as previous ones. The same polls, everything looks the same. But, we can never know. Last time the polls were not very accurate. Even the exit polls were not accurate. So we can never know. And these elections, I think the decision would they would decide by the parties passing or not passing the electoral threshold, by the turnout of the Arabs, not because the Arabs directly influence the government, but because when the Arabs get representation in the Knesset, it moves the center of the political map to the left. So these are two important things. Netanyahu also claims that his success is dependent on high turnout in the places that that supports him, in which he has large support. I think this is the case, but this is not as important as the two other elements. That's it. The elections look really the same, and because we already had 4 elections in 3.5 years, I think, so we can have 5 elections. Sorry, we can have the 6 also. That's the problem. The problem with the political system is that we pass too many Rubicons. The Knesset ousts itself, which is something that is really weird, unless you know people who get a job and then fire themselves. How can you explain this thing, that members of Knesset are elected and they go to the next elections? That's something really weird. The laws of nature tell us that people who get something do not give up on it so fast. And of course, this leads us to the power of Netanyahu. On the one hand, Netanyahu is the most powerful leader in the Israeli system, that's clear. However, the problem for Netanyahu is that he has a plurality, he doesn't have a majority. He has 45% strong support, nobody has such support, but he has 45, 46, it doesn't get past the 50%. If we talk about the Israeli right have 72 seats in 120 members Knesset. So it's clear that the right have a majority. Netanyahu in this election is trying, I believe, to close the gap between his personal support and the support for the right by conducting, for the first time in many years, a more partisan campaign. He's calling people to vote Likud, not for Netanyahu. That's something that I think is more prominent in these elections than before. Okay, that's it. I don't have more to add. We'll wait for the questions.
Okay, Ofer, we'll turn it over to you. Just a general question. Without systematic reform, are we doomed to continue this loop?
Well, I think, again, the big question is, the million-dollar question is how the party system will look in the unimagined day when Netanyahu wouldn't be a part of it no more. I think there are good chances that a sort of stability will return to the system, but we don't know. I think that in this context, we have to pay attention to the ideological shift that we witnessed in the past, I think, decade or so, meaning that the main political divide, the one that defined the difference between left and right, have shifted. It used to revolve around the various positions towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the two-state solution, Jewish settlements in the West Bank, and so on. And today, the divide is more about supporters of Israel as liberal democracy versus a more populist, nationalist stance. And this is why, as Gidi said, we have 72 majority for politicians who hold right-wing positions. But the question is, what exactly is right-wing today? I mean, we see a clear right-wing politicians in the anti-Bibi bloc, figures like Gideon Saar or Lieberman or Zeev Elkin. These are devoted right-wingers in their positions, but they do not share the vision of Israel as an orthodox, conservative nation, and therefore they are in the liberal right, which is apparently doesn't seem to be very large, but it is, I think, the most decisive in the past 3.5 years or so, because these are, I mean, all this crisis has begun in Avigdor Lieberman's decision not to join Netanyahu's and the ultra-Orthodox government following the first April 2019 elections. So in one way, this liberal right is decisive, but apparently it is very, very small. And I think this is also part of the question of how these elections will be decided. I mean, in the end, beyond the voting turnout and the electoral threshold, will Benny Gantz's party would have the ability to transform or shift even 20,000, 30,000 voters from the right wing or from Ayelet Shaked's party to his party, and this could be the game changer. So I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you for that. You talked a little bit about the liberal right. Now let's move even further right. Do you think that Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich will continue as a single party even after the elections, despite their own differences?
Well, back in the old days, like 2 months ago, when they decided to go together, they actually declared that it's a kind of a technical block. So yeah, if we're looking forward, I think that yeah, it's a very possible scenario, and I wouldn't rule out even a separate coalition negotiations vis-a-vis Likud, in the case Likud and Netanyahu would pass the 61 seats. So yeah, it is a very realistic option.
I'll just add to it that Ben Gvir and Smotrich, the alliance, so-called the Zionist religious Zionist, it is composed of 5 different political parties, and it is composed of 5 different political parties because they wanted to use the Israeli laws that give more money. When you have more parties in an alliance, you get more money for the campaign. So this is so they tried to use it, and they registered or used 5 different registered political parties. Now this is good for the campaign, but afterwards this is give them a lot of potential for divisions, because in Israel, according to Israeli laws, divisions are not. You might pay a price for a division unless you represent a political party. So I think that this alliance has, well, they created the conditions for their divisions after the elections. So I think that was a very good question, because right now they are very happy. They see a lot of they are doing very well in the polls. They have a lot of money, but after the elections, when the cake will be there and they'll have to divide it, they will start to debate between themselves, especially if they'll get less than what the polls predict for them, which is a possible scenario.
Okay, so speaking of other parties that might get less than what the polls predict for them, we heard Zahava Galon of Meretz speaking about the fact that her party needs to be saved. How do you think the Israeli political spectrum will look if Meretz or even Labor don't pass the voting threshold this time?
This would just make the center of the political map, would move it to the right. The whole elections are around the question, who is going to hold the 60 and 61 seats out of 120 member legislative parliament, legislative assembly parliament. That's it. So if Meretz would not pass the threshold, so the center moves to the right. If the Arabs vote, the center moves to the left. That's the whole question. So at the end of the day, and you see, the polls are 60-60, so we cannot know what will happen. So of course, if Meretz would not pass the threshold, we are very likely to see a victory for Netanyahu.
Okay. I personally know a lot of people who haven't decided who they're voting for yet. We know that a lot of things can impact voting behavior at the end of the day. It's even supposed to rain on Tuesday, which might bring down the desire of people to go out. But for those who eventually do but haven't decided yet, where do you think that the floating votes will go, given the plethora of parties that they can choose from? Ofer?
I really don't know. I think that it is split evenly, more or less, because this is how the pollsters are interpreting the floating votes. They do have a kind of a formula, and I guess that they assume that it evenly splitted between the blocks. Although we may expect a more perhaps hidden trend of people who would like to who would be in the last minute would vote for Ben Gvir, who seemingly is the pop star of the current elections. And I think that when we look at the exit polls in 10 p.m. Tuesday evening, in order for the center-left bloc to hope for stopping Netanyahu from gaining a majority, it would need to see a better result, meaning 61 seats in order, because I think that most of the late votes that will be counted will be mainly from soldiers, IDF soldiers, from young voters. And I think that in this population, in this electorate, Ben Gvir has a clear edge.
Okay,
I think that it might be the opposite, because in the last elections, the exit polls predicted the victory for Netanyahu, and this didn't happen. So I think that I understand that journalists have to produce news even before they happened. That's what we're trying to do now, actually. But even the exit polls wouldn't be the last word, I believe. That's the bad news. But the good news is that you will have news the day after that the polls were wrong or something like this. So, but I must say that if the polls would not be clear, if it would be 61 or even 62 to either of the camps, I would wait, because the votes that are not counted, Ofer, are not only the vote of the soldiers, but are also the vote of elder people and hospitals, and I mean, at the end of the day, there are too many of these votes. So I'm not sure that last elections, they changed actually more to the left.
Yeah, but last elections were exceptional because of the corona, who almost doubled the special votes, the late votes. This time the relative weight of the soldiers' vote will be larger this time.
Yeah,
maybe slightly larger.
I don't know. I mean, maybe you're right, but I don't know. If I look at the polls, there are some things that should really bother you. For example, everybody should know that it's very hard to poll the Arabs and the ultra-Orthodox. And you look at the polls and you see that the pollers give them again and again the same number of seats. So you ask yourself whether they compromise or when they work with it because they don't have any other options. I'm not criticizing them. I know how hard it is to poll. But then these are very important votes. But maybe they are compromising because, for example, to assume that when ultra-Orthodox would vote again and again the same way is 95% correct if you look at the past. However, we cannot know what will happen. Maybe Ben Gvir is going to make headways into the ultra-Orthodox camp. So these things might be quite surprising. And this would be surprising when compared to the opinion polls. And once again, this is good news for journalists, because, it's always news when you say they are doing better or worse than the opinion polls. And this is not only news, even politicians, when they do better than opinion polls or worse than opinion polls, are narrating it as a success, or they have to face a failure.
Okay, we're going to do one or two last questions on the prediction side of things before we move on to the bigger picture. One journalist is asking if you envision any realistic possibility of building a coalition if the Netanyahu bloc doesn't get 61 at the end of the day. And the second part to that is if he does get 61, Netanyahu, could it be possible that he would betray religious Zionism and form a more moderate government out of fear of international condemnation for including Ben Gvir into his government?
Ofer, me, myself.
You can each take one.
I think I will say shortly that if we learned one thing about Israeli coalition games is that you should never say never, and you may always expected as unexpected. Who would have imagined, following the 2021 results, that such a unique and bizarre government coalition will be formed? So, yeah, I think that everything is open with all the political analysts saying that Lapid doesn't have any chance of forming government, and if Netanyahu would gain 61, it is 100% that he would form a pure right-wing coalition. I suggest that let us be slightly modest, just based on the past. Never say never. Gidi.
Yeah, I must say that also. I don't think that Netanyahu will betray anything. I think that when he will decide, if he will decide to build a different coalition, he would be very convincing when he will say that he wants to stabilize Israel, save Israel. I don't think it look like a betrayal. I think Netanyahu have a lot of space for maneuver. He's the kind of leader that can tell his supporters that the sun is out when it's night, and I think most of them will live with it. So I think he have a space for maneuver. It would be hard for him now to abandon Smotrich and Ben Gvir, because he put too much, let's say, he really used their support and supported them, but I don't think it's impossible for him. Unless he's really becoming weaker than before, and this is, thinking about it, this is a possibility. Maybe after the 5th election, maybe he is weaker. But I think that, as Ofer said, everything is possible, and everything can be narrated as a need, emergency, security, and other stuff that can justify any political move. Okay,
let's move on to perhaps things that might be more related to your book. First of all, I will say that your institute put out a poll saying that almost 40% of the public do not trust the purity of the elections. It was 39 point something. And I recall that during the last elections, there was concern over all-out rejection of the results in the spirit of January 6th in Washington. Concerns which obviously were disproven because nothing happened and everyone accepted the results, including the opposition leader. So we're not America at the end of the day, but could we be? Could this be something that we see down the line with conspiracies rising?
Yeah, I'll answer and then Ofer, because Ofer, I'll just say that on the one hand, there was already an attempt, Ofer wrote about it, an attempt to delegitimize the election results. It didn't work. However, if it will work, it's much more dangerous than the United States. United States is a decentralized system, okay? So the supporters of Trump take the capital, so they take the capital. That's what they have. There are 50 states, there is still court, there is still, political power is spread all over. In Israel, power is more centralized, so this is very dangerous. And I must say that the legitimizing electoral results is a very, very dangerous thing for any democracy, because once people would not believe that the election results are real, it's a problem. And of course, in every election, everywhere in the world, there are some problems. But in Israel, the elections as they are run these days, so there might be a problem in this polling station or that polling station. And they did find here and there some problems, but at the end of the day, when you aggregate the votes, I think that they are probably reflect the will of the people. So those people who work day and night to make people not believe the system, I think they work against democracy. It's a problem. I mean, if they want to make elections more pure, that's a good project. But to delegitimize election results is very, very dangerous project. Ofer.
Yeah, I agree, and especially when it mainly overwhelmingly comes from a certain part of the political map, meaning from the right wing, trying to deal. Well, it is part of the populist wave of anti-elitist, anti-professional sentiments, and the very professional Israeli Central Election Committee is a victim of is a current victim of these sentiments. But I hope that just as it failed in the previous elections, there were tweets and posts even from Netanyahu's son, Yair Netanyahu, that said before the elections that the election results are going to be hijacked by the leftist Central Election Committee professionals. It didn't really catch these conspiracies, but it is a concern. I agree.
Is it accurate to say that it's all coming from one side of the political spectrum? I mean, not necessarily the conspiracy, but we have heard, we've heard sweeping remarks such as if the Religious Zionist Party takes office, then the justice system will be overturned. And this is one way of warning people against not voting and making sure that they're voting the way that they'd want them to vote. I mean, is it fair to say that it's all coming, that the extreme tone and language is only coming from one side of the spectrum?
About the accuracy of counting the votes, I think that, yeah, overwhelmingly.
No, not just about counting the votes, but in terms of the language itself in this election has been, not the nicest one to view from the side. And I think you can't ignore that it's coming from everywhere.
I think that the elections in Israel are, as much as I remember, are always full with these things. And of course, these things are more prominent than other things. So there is a vicious circle. If you don't say something really nasty, you don't get to the news, etc., etc. So that's how it works. Now, of course, there is a competition within the right-wing camp who will be more brutal when it comes to the justice system of Israel, to the court, to the Supreme Court, etc. So there is a competition there between moderate reform and fully fledged reform, but that's part of the whole idea of populism. Populism is about the rule of the people, which is a myth. So it's a rule of a majority of the people, so-called people. Okay, people are also those that voted for other party, but there are people, and the courts are blocking these people from having their views, because the people are want to have A, B, and C, and the courts say that it's not constitutional or this should not be done in a democracy. So that's the point of view of that is reflected in these elections. And this is a pity, because the Israeli justice system, while I'm proud of it and it's a good system, there is things that can be reformed. There is a place for a debate about some of the things that have to do with Israeli court, constitution, etc. But this debate cannot take place when this is the type of saying of we should take a D9 and destroy the Supreme Court. You cannot have a debate when you say such a thing. Supreme Court is an important part in a liberal democracy. You want to debate about its authority, that's great. It should be done. It should be restrained sometimes. It should be expanded sometimes. That's a good thing to debate on, but not in such a way. Then, of course, that's elections, election time, and you can hope that after elections it will sound differently. But I'm not sure about it.
Okay, let's look at how Israel is faring compared to the rest of the world. The UK has had 3 prime ministers in 2 months. The Republican and Democratic parties in the US have struggled for years to appoint a leader with widespread support. Could it be that liberal democracies worldwide are in a crisis that no electoral reform would fix? Maybe it has to come from the bottom up.
Wow, that's a big question. Well, I think there are clearly worrying signs in the past, I don't know, few years or decades or so, but we always should see things in broader perspectives, and I think that some would claim that in a way the populist wave is a sort of a counter reaction to the liberal waves of the 1990s, I think so. But about the system of governments, yeah, I think that what happened when you take the presidential system in the United States and you take the parliamentary systems of UK and Israel, and you see that in both systems you see such a stability or non-governability in the case of the United States that there are worrying signs, but still I don't see any magic solution in the specific case of Israel. I think that the chronic instability has a connection to the unique feature of Israel political system of the ability of the Knesset to dissolve itself very easily. You just need a simple majority, and you can call an early election. I think in this specific feature, we can try and change the rules of the game and perhaps contribute for a more stable system.
It sounds like you do have a solution at hand. Gideon, do you want to expand on that, or?
Yeah, I'll just add something to offer. First of all, I don't know of any alternative to democracy that is better than democracy.
That's not what I was suggesting, just to be clear.
Yeah, so I mean, with all the respect. And then the second thing is, I think that the founding fathers of the United States, for example, are sitting there in the sky and they are very happy because what they try to build is a government that is almost unable to govern, to let the people decide for themselves. That was their philosophy. And that's what they made checks and balances. Maybe they are quite worried because the checks and balances are working too well. I mean, the politicians are checking each other too much. They do not let each other do anything. Maybe they take it to the extreme, but nevertheless, real Democrats should prefer governments that are in such a situation to governments that are selected in different ways. Now, when it comes to the case of Israel, if you want to reform the system, Ofer is right. You can. We are trying to suggest that the Knesset should be elected and form a government with whatever the people decided. They should not go back again and again to the people. You were elected, build a government. You cannot oust yourself now and do something to change the situation. Now you can have other reforms like changing the electoral system, like changing other things that would reshuffle the cards, the political cards. It is possible. And it used to be in the past that when you had a political crisis, politicians would turn to this solution. For example, in 1992, unfortunately, they turned to the wrong solution, to direct election for the prime minister, but at least there was a crisis and they looked for a change, for reform. These days, it's very hard to promote any reform. However, some reforms passed. I mean, a real constitutional reform passed without, maybe you didn't notice, but in the law book of the State of Israel, there is an alternative prime minister within the law books, an option to build a government built up of two camps that are not in the same size, but will share the power evenly, and there will be a prime minister and an alternative prime minister. This is something that Netanyahu and Gantz put into our system, and it is there, and I'm not sure that it is there to go. Once you have this option, it might be the future of Israeli democracy, two prime ministers, okay? So reforms are not just what we in the Israeli democracy craft and engineer very carefully. Sometimes they just happen, and they are there, and they are there. Maybe they're the only solution for this crisis, this power sharing. And power sharing in itself is not bad for a country that is divided and polarized.
Could such a crisis, and I think this will be the last question, could such a crisis be maybe the turning point that allows for another attempt at a constitution, given that constitutions are usually born as a result of a crisis?
I'll answer first, Ofer. This is, it's kind of, that's how they paint Marxist all the time, that they say the worse it is, the better it would be. I don't believe in it. I don't think that's how things work. And I think that this crisis is an opportunity to promote good reforms. That's what we do in the Israel Democracy Institute. We try to promote good reforms. We do it because we believe in them, but also because we know if we wouldn't be there, somebody will try to promote bad reforms. So that's how I see our mission. But I don't think that necessarily such a crisis would, we will come out with something better. Sometimes a crisis leads to another crisis and to loss of trust in democracy. That's really worrying. Ofer, that's your turn.
No, I'll just say that, sometimes constitutions are born from crisis, but I don't think that the types of crisis where you have a political tie, like 50-50. I think in order to build a constitution, you have to gain a broad consensus, and the current political climate in Israel, there is nothing further than broad consensus. So I don't think we will see in the near future.
We can learn from Chile that had the same divisions and they had the constitution. The constitution was rejected. We can learn from Italy that had important constitutional initiatives 5 years ago, but because of polarization, they didn't pass in a referendum. Chile the same. So I don't think that, I think that Ofer is totally right. That's not the time for constitution. Polarization is not the good time for a constitution, especially when people now debate the rules of the game as part of their deep ideology, against the court, for the courts, stuff like this.
Okay, well, I sincerely hope that the next time we speak isn't for another pre-election event. I'd like to thank both of you, Professor Gidi Rahat, Senior Fellow at the Israel Democracy Institute and a member of Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and Professor Ofer Kenig, Research Fellow at the Israel Democracy Institute and lecturer at Ashkelon Academic College. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just before we wrap up, I'll take this opportunity to invite journalists on the line to tune in on Thursday to a special broadcast from the Jerusalem Press Club with back-to-back panelists analyzing the initial results. Information on this and additional activity throughout the month will be in your inboxes. Have a good day, everybody. And don't forget to vote, those of you with eligibility.